Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 143.
Aw, Ben, 143 you too, buddy.
Is that like Morse code or something? I don't know that one.
So back in the days, in the long ago, when we had pagers, so like what, the early 90s, people would commonly page 143 as shorthand for I love you.
Oh, that's right. When you could only send like one-way text messages, basically. Yes. 143 means ILY.
143 is one letter in I, 4 letters in love, and 3 letters in you.
Got it.
So,
okay.
143 you too, buddy.
Thanks, Josh. Josh, last time in the Bad at Magic podcast, you talked about the 142 midshipmen from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy that died in World War II. And I pressed your knowledge a little bit, mistakenly, my bad, about what the U.S. Merchant Marine actually does. So I read up on it. I'm ready to talk about it. So
I think the Merchant Marine is like a police, like a law enforcement thing. Nope, not at all. Dang it, that's the Coast Guard.
It's like it has a primarily commercial relevance that has a military relation. Here's how it works. The U.S. Merchant Marine are 465 vessels that are strictly for carrying cargo.
What? Huh? Okay.
Here's the national security piece. You'll understand why I tell you this. The U.S. only accounts for 6% of the world population, but a full third of the sea shipping. So our national
out or
existence.
In? Are we shipping stuff out or are we receiving things?
We purchase nearly a third of the world's output of raw materials.
Man, that's telling. We just want all your stuff. Give us all
Josh,
your stuff.
Stay on target. Don't go down this tangent. So we purchase a third of the world's raw materials, 99% of which are shipped over the world's seas. So our existence as a country depends on our ability to ship goods over the seas. Also,
people don't appreciate giant cargo freighters enough. Like pound for pound, the amount of stuff that is on that boat is insane.
Now, not only that, but if we were ever to actually go to war, our ability to be efficacious in that war depends wholly on our ability to get a whole bunch of people and stuff over the oceans that surround our country.
We got C-17s for that.
Yeah. You just said this a second ago. Have you ever seen a chart? Because I have. I was in United States Transportation Command. Do you know how many C-17s it takes to equal one ocean-going vessel? It's like 400. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I believe that.
So that's really fast if you just need to take a little bit of stuff overnight. But we have charts for this, the Transportation Command. Basically, if you have this much stuff, stop talking about planes and start talking about boats is the answer.
I love that. Is there another step? Does it get exponentially bigger than that? All right, at this point, stop talking about boats and start talking about balloons. Pray to God we never have to use the balloons.
So, and I was present in the room for a lot of discussions about this kind of thing. Basically, we don't have enough requirements in the U.S. military day-to-day to fully employ the fleet of ships we would need to execute a war. But we need to keep that capability simmering.
Okay.
And that's what the U.S. Merchant Marine's about.
So it's like the guard for military logistics?
Yes.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yep. So they transport domestic and international cargo and passengers during peacetime, but in wartime they can be an auxiliary to the U.S. Navy and transport personnel and materiel for the military. So when you go to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, you incur either a 5-year active duty service commitment in one of the branches of the military or an 8-year reserve commitment, in like the Coast Guard or the Navy or whatever. Okay. And then you're done, and and this is a way you get to be a ship's captain, and how the U.S. maintains an organic capability of our citizens as the captain of ocean-going logistics vessels, so that if something kicks off, we aren't like asking people from other countries to ship our stuff.
Oh, okay. That's actually really interesting. This just reinforces things that we say in this podcast from time to time, and that is the reason our military might is what it is because of logistics.
Yeah.
Listener, if you want to be a great general, you need to stop reading Patton and Sun Tzu and start reading UPS and FedEx manuals.
Yep, totally. Or Maersk.
Maersk.
The world's largest ocean shipping company.
You are just full of fun little tidbits.
I worked at United States Transportation Command.
You
Okay,
just know
I have
everything.
a story that I'll tell sometime about how Maersk was impacted by the NotPetya virus in 2017, right when I arrived and first became the cybersecurity operations officer for United States Transportation Command. That was fascinating.
This is why we're friends. You have such cool anecdotes. How do you find yourself in these weird situations?
I know, right? Just right place at right time. Josh, there's something else I want to ask you about. You're going to know a lot more about it than me, but since the last time we recorded, we were talking about the imminent TikTok ban right before the inauguration of President Donald Trump as U.S. president. In fact, when the TikTok ban went into effect, you sent me a screenshot of the, sorry, TikTok isn't available right now. A law banning TikTok has been enacted in the U.S. Unfortunately, that means you can't use TikTok right now. And then we are fortunate that President Trump has indicated he will work with us on a solution to reinstate TikTok once he takes office. Please stay tuned. And you told me that you opened the TikTok app like 3 times that day and saw this warning screen each time.
That was painful day, Ben. And I'll tell you, because it's muscle memory. When I say
Right.
I use this app 5 times a day, I'm not joking. And it's one of the few things that's on my lock screen. And I can't just pick up my phone and not have my thumb reflexively like try to open TikTok at any point. And so seeing this message over and over and over again was so disheartening.
Okay, but it's so weird that this went into effect since the last time we recorded and it's already gone and it feels like a distant memory. So talk about what happened.
So remember on the podcast, all right, so the podcast happened on Friday and then Saturday I got that message. And the second, Ben, there is 3 lines of text about how it's banned, and there's 4 lines of text about how they are so lucky President Trump is really willing to work with TikTok.
It feels like a setup.
It's
because
it's them kissing his butt, like I said. And
so it would, yeah, I guess you're right, because it was down for 12 hours. That's it.
The infamous 12-hour TikTok ban, because I opened it the next day, and I got, like, again, muscle memory, not expecting anything, and I got a pop-up message that says, "Welcome back. Thanks for your patience and support. As a result of President Trump's efforts, TikTok is back in the U.S."
Wow.
And it's just been back, and it's just been kind of normal.
How could it have only been 12 hours and not just been planned as like a strategic butt-kissing exercise?
I don't know, Ben, because so the president was empowered by the law to stay the ban of TikTok for 90 days while...
But he hadn't even been inaugurated yet. They were giving him credit for... This is on the 19th of January. He wasn't even officially president.
Man, I don't know.
What?
I don't know how anything works anymore.
He got inaugurated the next day.
Well, President Trump gave me back my TikTok, so I guess I'm pro-Trump now. Oh, wait, hang on a second. Let me think about all the negative things. No, I'm still not a big Trump fan.
Okay.
But I do have TikTok
listeners,
back, and I'm a big fan of TikTok.
Don't worry, for our warm-up, Josh and I spent 20 minutes talking about all that so we could spare you from it on the podcast.
There were tears. There were punches. It was cathartic.
I have to patch this hole in the drywall. All right, Josh, I want to do a segment. I'm going to call it Bad at Society. So, as you know, in the psychological profile scale, I rank very high on openness to new experience. So when I had an old high school buddy who is now a director of like visual media, like he's had 2 of his commercials be in the Super Bowl.
Wow. Okay.
So he's like big time. We went to high school together when we were 15. We've just kept in touch over the years.
Okay, so listeners, that's something you need to learn about Ben. If you ever meet Ben, you will never unmeet Ben. You're just now in his friend list, and he will pop in and check in on you every once in a while and maybe come mow your grass.
So he sends me a text and he says, "Hey, the UFC's having a fight at the Masonic Lodge up here in Salt Lake City this week. Does anybody want to go?" Tickets are...
Okay, this is the freaking thing where I messaged you something because we chat occasionally via text.
It was Friday night. You're like, "Hey, are you playing the new Magic set?" I was like,
Yeah, and then I get a picture, like Ben is prone to do. If he can't explain what's happening, or it's too many lines or too many characters or whatever, he will just type current situation, : and then take a picture of his surroundings, which is always the most random thing that you can possibly imagine. If you had given me $10,000 and 6 hours, to come up with guesses for where Ben was.
It's Ben at the Masonic Lodge in Salt Lake City at
At no
UFC
time
fight.
during my 6 hours of guessing would UFC have come out of my mouth.
So I believe your next words to me after that were, what kind of what does the UFC look like in Utah? And I said, we start with an opening prayer and we say we hope everybody has a good time.
and I can see that happening. Like, that's just, yeah.
Have you ever gone to a UFC fight, Josh?
No, I've never gone to have I gone to watch two sweaty men beat the crap out of each other?
Okay,
No.
first of all, this was equal opportunity, so it was equal parts male and female.
Okay, fair. That's the male default thinking. You rightfully called me out for that.
We walked in the room. We kind of got there a little bit after like the low fight started, and watched a punch land and a girl get knocked out, like unconscious on the mat.
Being knocked out is super bad for you. Like, she needs to go get a CAT scan like that day.
Okay, so I kind of had a little bit of a conflict about this because of that. Because of that.
Because of the people getting or the woman
Yeah,
getting?
am I supporting this sport that just, is dealing like lifelong injuries to these people, and they're basically modern day gladiators, and it's me being in the arena perpetuating this thing that's unhealthy and bad.
Ben, if you're perpetuating that, I'm perpetuating the NFL. So we are both equally guilty of large or just athletic people beating the snot out of each other.
Okay. So I went to this UFC fight, watched, 15 matches. I was astonished at several things. One was the variety of victory conditions. Like, it was really blew me away. I saw rear submission holds, front submission holds, arm bars, knockouts, decisions, a judge kind of just waving off a fight. One guy, oh man, there was only one that really kind of churned my stomach. But without exception, there was an incredible amount of sportsmanship. Like, it was really astonishing. Like, there was none of the stuff they like to play up online where they're like, insulting each other's mothers before the match. It was just like really sportsmanlike up until the time the fighting start. And then the second the horn blew or the judge waved, it was back to, hey, good job, man. Well done. Well, high fives. Congratulations.
Well, so that obviously has to be because they could. All right. So if they're going to be insulting each other or playing it up for the dramatics beforehand, obviously they're just drumming up publicity for the fight. They want more people, more butts and seats, mean more money for them.
Sure.
And second, like you're talking about, this isn't the NFL where somebody's going to throw a flag if you don't put a pillow down for Patrick Mahomes before you tackle him. Like, the UFC is legit, and they're choking each other out, and they're doing the arm bars. Like,
yeah.
You know how much extra effort it takes to snap somebody's arm off if you have them in an arm bar?
Not a lot more than is applied to get them to tap out.
So that's the thing. So the person that you are fighting against, you do not want them to be legitimately upset with you when a quarter of an inch is the difference between you snapping a tendon and not.
That's an interesting thing because I was thinking about it while I was watching that. Are like the guys with lower social inhibition more effective because they're not trying as hard to pull their punches and not actually, kill someone or end someone's career?
I think they're still trying to knock each other out. I think that's an accepted, like, this is what's going to happen. But like a good chokehold or an armbar can legitimately kill someone if you do it wrong. And I think they're all aware of that.
Yeah. Well, I won't be doing it again, but I definitely was willing to go and check it out one time. It was interesting.
What was your favorite part? Favorite part of the whole thing?
Okay, so my friend that's the ad exec is also a stand-up comedian. Like, he occasionally does stand-up. And the week before, I went and saw him at a improv show.
Good timing. Hey, I happen to have these extra tickets to UFC, and you were one of 3 people in my stand-up audience. Would you like to come with me? Yeah.
So he's sitting next to me, and he's doing like this running commentary of the show where he's just like cheering for things that make no sense. Like, hey, he punched you in the toe. Are you going to stand up for that? Just stuff like that. And so I just, it was like Mystery Science Theater 3000 UFC.
That's cool.
And had a great time.
Did Alicia go with you?
Absolutely not.
Oh, I was hoping it'd be like a date night thing. It's like, oh, sweetie, I got
No, it was guys' night out. It was 4 Mormon guys sitting in the Masonic Lodge watching people choke each other out.
Weird, but cool. That sounds fun.
It was a good time. What about you? What did you do that was bad at society this week?
Okay, so I saw something on social media Have you ever read a comment or read an article or seen something that you had to stop, put your phone down, and then just stare at a wall blankly for like an hour because it impacted you so hard? I had one of those moments when I heard this because I was just doing chores, listening to random things, and this guy goes, "Oh, it's kind of like how anything that you see anywhere, you will instinctively know what it feels like to lick that thing." And I was like, what? And I replayed it, and he said the same thing. Funny enough, I rewinded 30 seconds and he said the same thing. Anything that you look at, you instinctively know what it would feel like to lick it. And then I paused it, and I started looking around the room. Like, that can't possibly be like, oh, dear Lord. I know exactly what it would be like to lick any of the things in this room. Listener, like, if you're driving a car, you need to stop listening to me right now. Otherwise, start looking around. Everything that your eyes land on, you know exactly what it would feel like to lick it. Not what it would taste like, but what it would feel like. And
why do I know this?
Yes.
Why do I know this?
Yes, that's what's freaking me out. You're doing it, right? Because, all right, listeners, Ben's looking around his room, and am I right or am I wrong?
I'm stopping on every object, and it's like I've done it already. Like, my brain just goes, yes, that's what that would be like to lick.
Yeah. Why do we have this skill?
It has to be because I've done it.
How? When? No.
I don't know. I don't know.
But that's the thing that's freaking me out. That made me stare at a wall for an hour because I had to stop staring at stuff, Ben. I had to stop looking around the room that I was in and imagining licking all the things.
What was his point, though?
I don't even remember. It doesn't matter.
To make you stop what you're doing and stare off into space? Why do I know this?
That podcast could have had definitive proof that God exists, and I would have completely forgotten it because of that comment.
Yeah, all right. Well, listeners, if you stopped... Okay, what I want to know, because I haven't yet looked at something, is there something that you looked at and you thought, no way, I absolutely have no idea what it would be like to lick that particular thing?
Ben, not a single thing. There's not a single thing since I've heard this that I've looked at and be like, I have no idea what that would feel like to lick. Go outside. You know what it would be like to lick a tree. You know what it would be like to lick the sidewalk. It's crazy.
I'm having vague memories of all the stuff I put in my mouth as a kid, though. Like, maybe that's what babies are doing. As soon as they learn how to work their hands, they start putting stuff in their mouth and building this up. So maybe we're just flashing back to when we were babies and we built the catalog.
So hang on, I can't remember what it was like to be born, but I can remember what it's like to lick a penny.
But we're commenting on how weird it is that we just feel so certain we would know what everything feels like to be in our mouth. Well, there was a time when we put everything in our mouth.
Words are important because we don't think we know. We know. There is no, I think it would be like this. No, your brain knows and comes up with a 100% definitive answer. There is no uncertainty whatsoever.
You're right. Like, I have never licked a microphone or my computer monitor, but I'm pretty sure I know what it would be like.
Not pretty sure. You're absolutely certain. That's the weird part about this. Like, we can be pretty sure we know how planets rotate. We can be pretty sure we know how volcanoes form. Ben, I know beyond any shadow of a doubt what this drywall would feel like in my mouth.
It's like I've done it and I'm remembering it, not like I'm just compiling memories to try to think of what the experience would be like.
Is this the cheat code? Is this the glitch in the Matrix? Is this the bug in the simulation that is our existence? Are we not supposed to know it until we do it, but we do because there's some faulty code in that specific set of memory?
Does that mean our other existence is very oral?
Ben, this is a family show. I don't think you could be saying stuff like that.
All right, Josh, then let's transition to Bad at Probability. So you and I both, I don't know why, decided that we wanted to talk about probability.
Oh, hang on. Hang on a second. You want to talk about probability. I saw it in the show notes. I'm like, that's weak sauce probability. Let me talk about real probability. I'm just trying to story top you.
So the reason, that's fine. I do it to you so much. I deserve to get it every now and then. So why we want to talk about this, I think, is one of the themes of the Bad at Magic podcast. And it's about thinking. Like, Why do we think the things we do? What influences us to think that way? How do we think that way? And why, sometimes when we're wrong about something, why are we wrong? So what I want to talk about is called the Monty Hall problem. The reason it's called the Monty Hall problem. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you need to put the background in first, because sure. I just knew what the Monty Hall problem was. I was going to launch right into my high-handed, obnoxious spiel, but you go first.
The reason it's called the Monty Hall problem is Monty Hall was the host of a show back in the, 60s called Let's Make a Deal. And the conceit of the show was that he would call up someone in the audience up and offer them a chance to win something valuable, but with some risk involved and maybe some randomness as well. So the scenario goes, here are 3 doors. Behind the 3 doors, behind each of the 3 doors is either a goat or a car. There are 2 goats and 1 car. Pick at random one of the 3 doors. And then
this is the door. You win whatever is behind this door. And then where the real show takes off is he starts offering you this side stuff. And usually it's like, oh, well, I'll give you $500 to go sit back down and not
open the door.
But what he does is they will then open one of the other doors. One of the doors that you
didn't pick.
Did not pick, and show you, obviously, that it was wrong. Because funny thing about math, there's 3 doors, you pick one, they're always guaranteed to have 1 door left that is not the thing that you want to win. So They show that to you, like, now, do you want to stick with the door that you have, or do you want to switch to the other door?
Right. So the intuition in this situation is that it doesn't matter. Like, you had a 1 in 3 chance when you picked the first door, and so what's the point of switching after he shows you one of the ones you didn't pick wasn't the one? But in actuality, you improve your odds significantly by switching after you're shown which door wasn't the one.
This is one of those fun things that math explains the universe, but it's not intuitive. When you initially selected your door, you had a 1 in 3 chance of being right. And like I just mentioned, he is guaranteed by the pigeonhole principle to have at least 1 false door to show you. Right. So he is guaranteed, he is always able to show you a loser. Okay? So he shows you the loser and then asks you, do you want to switch? Here is where everybody gets tripped up. The other door, the door you have still only has a 1 in 3 chance of being correct, because that's when you selected it. But the other door now has a 50% chance of being correct, because he's eliminated one of the options now. And I had not an argument, but one of those discussions where agree to disagree kind of thing with my spouse earlier today. She's like, yeah, but you also have a 50% chance to win in your door. No, false. This door.
It's only a 33% chance.
Well, what happens if you had the door and you switch and then you lose? Like, it doesn't matter. The odds of the other door winning are higher than the door that you have. What you're talking about is the gambler's fallacy.
Sure. And if you go back to the beginning of the problem, the switching strategy has a 2/3 chance of winning, and the not switching strategy has a 1/3 chance of winning.
Oh, don't you love that? You have doubled your odds by switching the doors.
That's it. So if you ever are on Let's make a deal and you're shown the wrong door and offered a chance to switch, go ahead and do it.
You should switch. Even if you lose, you can still stand on your principles at the bar and be like, well, I had a better chance if I switched, so I switched.
Now, this Monty Hall problem kind of gained popularity when it was published in Parade magazine in 1990 under a column called Ask Marilyn, which isn't that interesting other than the fact that, like, this thing existed long before it got this specific scenario.
You mean math? Math existed long before there was a specific scenario for it?
So there used to be a mathematician called Martin Gardner who published in Scientific American in 1959, and he called it The Three Prisoners. It's the same thing, but instead of getting a car or a goat, you either get set free or executed.
Higher stakes.
Yeah, but it's the exact same thing. Same odds, same decision path. And 100 years before that, a French mathematician by the name of Joseph Bertrand posed a question that he called Bertrand's box. Slightly different. Here's how it works. You've got 3 boxes. They each have 2 silver coins, 1 gold and 1 silver, and 2 gold. And the gold are significantly more valuable than the silver.
Well, according to D&D, a gold is worth 10 silver.
So you have a chance to reach into the box and pull out a coin at random. and then decide which box you want to keep based on that one single piece of information. It's the equivalent of opening the door. But in this version of the problem, you pull out a gold coin.
Okay.
Now, which box do you choose?
If you've already pulled out one gold coin?
Yep.
All right, so let me...
This is the same problem, but in reverse. It ends up with the same odds: 2/3 chance versus 1/3 chance.
Versus getting the double gold box.
Yep, double gold box versus the gold silver box.
Gotcha. Okay. This is pigeonhole principle. Okay, you have a drawer full of socks. You're getting dressed in the dark. You have 23 white socks. You have 53 black socks. How many socks do you have to pull out of the drawer to guarantee you have a matching pair of socks? Doesn't matter which color. The answer is, it doesn't matter how many of each kind of sock that you have. It matters how many colors you have. So you have to pull out 3 socks. That's it. Because if the first one's white and the second one's black, it doesn't matter what the third sock's going to be.
The next sock's going to make a pair.
It's going to make a pair. Exactly.
Yep. Okay, so in this case, the answer is don't switch. You had the best by pulling the gold coin out. That indicates you have the box with the best odds of being the double gold coin box.
Ooh, good point. Yes, that makes sense. You're rarely going to get burned by the fact that you randomly pick the gold out of the gold silver. You're more likely to have the gold. Okay, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yep.
So, listeners, if you're ever in a back alley hustle game where guys got 3 boxes and some gold coins, you know what to do.
All right, well, let's hear yours then if you're going to one-up me.
I want to story top you. So, the Monty Hall problem, because this comes up on TV sometimes and people will argue about it and like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. Like, shut up. It makes perfect sense. For some reason, the Monty Hall has always clicked immediately in my brain. Like, this one makes sense. Yeah, I get it. Obviously, that's got to be how it works. One that didn't click very well in my brain when I was learning it the first time was the birthday paradox. And you've heard this
I've heard this one, right? You got a room full of people. The odds are really high that 2 people are going to have the same birthday.
So, like, when we say really high, like, it's stupid high. Listeners, if you've never heard this, it's fascinating. 23 people. If you have 23 people in a room, you have a 50-50 chance of 2 of them sharing a birthday.
Have you ever seen this demonstrated in real life?
Yes. When we learned about this in college.
Me too.
Yeah, the college professor
it's
started
difficult to
the class.
do. Like, if you're the professor, like, how do you actually do it? How did yours do it?
I started with months. Who's got a birthday in January? And then people would raise their hand. What day? Okay, never mind. Who's got one in February? Okay. And so he just pared it down by months and then had him say the day.
Did it happen? Was
Twice!
There 2 people
there was 18 people in the room, and there was 2 that shared a birthday, and we didn't know that. And we shared every class together.
Like, there's 365 days in the year. There's 40 people in this room. How could 2 people possibly have the same birthday?
And here's the thing. Like, it didn't make any sense to me why this probability goes up so fast. Because it goes up really fast. 23 people is a 50-50 chance. 30 people is a 70% chance.
What?
50 people is a 97% chance.
Holy smokes.
If you have 60 or more, 60 people is 99.4%. Like 60, and you're almost guaranteed to get at least 1 pair.
Huh.
And that didn't make any sense to me until the professor explained, like, you know how like good teachers do. Here's how one way to explain it. Now let me explain it a different way.
Okay.
You don't think about the days, and you don't think about the number of people. What you think about is the number of pairs of people in the room. Okay?
Ooh, that's like factorial.
Exactly. So the math to figure out the pairs, like how many pairs of people can I make with this group of people?
Okay, I can take this person here and pair him with every single person in the room.
Then you go to the next person.
I can take the next person and pair him with every single person in the room except that guy.
Except the first one, right.
Yeah.
So if you have n people, it's n times n minus 1 divided by 2 because you're making pairs.
This is called permutation or combination. I can't remember which.
One of those, yeah. We everybody learned permutation and combination, and everyone immediately forgot if it's permutation or combination. So if n equals 23, that's our 50% line, right? You have 23 people, but with the math, you have 253 pairs of people. Okay?
Got it.
Now, if you have 50 people, that's our 97%. That jumps to 1,225 pairs of people.
So now you have more pairs of people than there are days in the year.
You have 4 times as many pairs as there are days, which is why the percentage of the chances of it matching go up so fast.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, okay, I like that. I like that your professor taught you why it's counterintuitive, because you're thinking about it wrong.
That was the best math class I ever had. It was called Math 381. It was computer science math, and we didn't use not one number in the whole freaking class. It was that stuff about the matching socks, and it was the stuff about the birthday paradox. It was all the tricky math things that you can do weird things in computers with.
Why though? How does that compare?
So this all goes real quickly into some really squirrely conversations about how computers work with different math. For example, it's crazy, but once I learned it, I started recognizing it in like the code that they were generating. It's almost like the teachers were giving me problems where this stuff I would come across it. Stuff like node coloring theory. Like if I have a graph of nodes, like a bunch of points, and I want to connect them with lines, and I need to color all of these nodes, but I don't want two of the same color touching. How many colors am I going to need to color all of the things based on the connections that I have? Yeah. Turns out the answer is usually 4.
Right. We learned about that in elementary school when they talked about cartography. Like how many, you got countries on a map and their borders are all touching. How many colors do you need?
Yeah. The difference is when you were learning it in elementary school, it was a trivia piece. When I learned it in college, it was like, oh crap, I've got to actually implement this. They did horrible things to us, Ben. Like, this little problem here, code this over the weekend and get it solved by Monday. That's your homework. And we're like, psh, that'll take 6 lines of code, oh man. You just gave us a weekend off. And none of us could figure out why our computers kept crashing when we tried to implement that code. So they were just mean to us that way. That's why we were learning weird math for computers.
So, but I'm still struggling with the fact that you told me you took a math course where you weren't doing math and he was mostly just trying to get you to think about hard problems that are counterintuitive. I mean, was it about critical thinking or was it about math?
It was math for computers. It was being able to recognize when the problem that you were trying to solve in the computer reflected one of these mathematical principles, and then all of the things that you knew about those principles you could leverage against said problem.
Huh. All right. Well, yeah, you definitely topped my story. Good job. I like that one, the birthday problem. I'm trying to think of a situation where I'd be able to do it because I kind of want to do it.
How many people work for you? How many staff meetings do you have? Does anybody have... All right, before we close the staff meeting for all the managers, does anybody have any comments? Ben, go ahead and talk. We already know that you've got a look on your face.
All right, guys, since you're all captive audience and we ended our meeting 5 minutes early, I want to try out the birthday problem. Woo! Yeah. Oh, man. That sounds like a bad idea.
And
you need a room full of captive college students that are curious.
You're going to be so tempted to do it in every meeting you are in from now until you get to do it at the next Christmas party. I know you are.
Yeah. Well, the only people I can think of right now that I would try to do it with, I know all their birthdays, and I know they aren't the same.
Of course you do. When's the next time you're the guest speaker at the church? You get up on the pulpit. All right, everyone, let's talk about the bonds that we all share as people.
You're right. That would be a way to do it. It would still be logistically hard to find it. Like, what if I can't? If I'm doing it by month and the match is in December,
you'd stumble on one faster than that, I bet.
So I read in one of these design books I read this example of a problem you give a group of people when you're talking about problem solving. Here's how it works. You get a room full of people, we'll say 50 people, and they all write their name on a balloon, and then they all throw them in a pile in the middle, and then you give them 2 minutes to find their own balloon, and almost nobody finds their balloons.
Yep.
And then you give them the same 2 minutes, and you say, pick up the first balloon you see and find the person it goes to. And that solves the problem every time.
Here's the thing, though, Ben. About that problem, every time I've heard this multiple times, and every time I hear it, I'm so mad because obviously the first time when everybody was given the task, go find the balloon with your name on it, nobody was implementing the obviously superior strategy of every time you pick a balloon that doesn't have your name on it, you pop it and move on to the next one. You eliminate repeating stuff. I don't understand how people don't see that as an option.
That's the kind of thing. Gosh, that really resonates with me, and that's the kind of outside of the box thinking that's also lawful evil. We eliminate that whole quadrant of possibilities because it's really antisocial.
Why? Who cares? My objective is to find the balloon with my name on it, not to make sure everybody gets their balloon. I don't care about anybody else's balloon. I'm going to solve the problem. So if you don't like my solution, give me a better problem, Ben.
You're reminding me of this clip I've seen of like a wiener dog race at the 50-yard line, the middle of a like college football game, where the first wiener dog runs out and bites all the other dogs before he runs to the finish line.
You see, that's and everybody points. And so this is why social contracts exist, because everybody points at that wiener dog. Oh, that wiener dog is bad, and I'm over here like, no, that wiener dog won. Suck it up.
All right, Josh. Well, speaking of dogs, what are you reading right now?
Oh, you just teed that up for me so nice, okay, cool. So Ben, today, this day that we are recording, I just finished the 4th book of the Stormlight Archive, The Rhythm of War. And there is so much that happened in this book that I had forgotten because I'd only read it once before. And so it was delightful to go back and read this one again.
Even though you're a serial rereader, you'd forgotten enough that this felt like a fresh read.
It really did. Like, I remembered some of the main story beats, but there was a lot of little things that I found myself like really getting sucked into again. And I knew about, I'm going to talk about one specific little subsection of the book, okay? And this is, so in the books, in the Cosmere, good Lord, there's so much preface I have to do to this. All of Brandon Sanderson's books take place in the same universe, okay? They all have different magic systems, but they're different planets. The magic is the same, but it manifests differently in different places. Don't question it. It's awesome. And there is one character that exists consistently across all of these stories. He is this immortal storyteller.
Yeah, he's the Tom Bombadil of Brandon Sanderson's multiverse.
Yeah, most people know him as Hoyd, and he's great,
Hoyd.
And he's sarcastic,
That's right.
And he's fantastic, and everybody loves him, and he's just so fun when he shows up. Well, he's like a main character in the Stormlight Archive.
I wonder why you like that character so much, because I don't.
That's why I like him so much. He's the kind of jerk that just resonates with me. And you're sitting there reading his like quips and like, that's kind of rude. He should be nicer to people. And I'm over here like, let him have it.
This guy annoys me because he's just so he's so detached. Like, he's here for it, but he's like Q in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Like, he's just immortal and he's amused by the fact that you're distressed.
Okay, spoilers for the entire Cosmere, everyone, so shut your ears if you're not listening. We've pieced together from all of Brandon Sanderson's literature that there was one entity that was essentially God that somehow was splintered into 16 shards of, like, each shard has its own distinct, like, personality or flavor to it. It's like cultivation, passion, honor, preservation, ruin, autonomy. Like, these are the kinds of things that
wow, that was really good. I was wondering how long you were going to go on for.
Those are the ones I could name off the top of my head. There's probably a couple more that I'm missing. But anyway, when he was shattered into 16 pieces, there was 17 people present that did that to the original god Adonalsium, okay? And the 16, they all got a shard, and then Hoyd, our guy, he went, no, I'd rather not have a shard, thank you. But we don't know.
So he volunteered to be the odd man out because there was wrong numbers.
Yeah, he didn't want a shard, but he still got something. And from what I can piece together, this is not like fanfic or this is not like researching on the internet. My understanding, theory. This is my headcanon for Hoyd, is he is immortal just because of the fact that he was present when God died, and just the backlash of that, he's just now got all the magic, I guess. And like based on things that he says, I think he has the ability to be where he is most needed, but not the ability to not be where he is most needed. I think he is pulled either spiritually or magically or against his will almost into different circumstances because he is needed there. Okay. So he's always around when something climactic is happening, and we just accept that because this is Hoyd and he's always around when important things are happening. And so one of our characters, our pivotal character, was being kind of tortured by a god. Like, he was in a coma, and so while he was in the coma, this mean god took his soul and put it in actual hell. And it was breaking him mentally and spiritually. Like, it sucked being there. And so Hoyd showed up at just the right time to save him from being entirely consumed by the darkness and just totally shutting down and becoming catatonic forever. And in that moment, Hoyd sheltered him and he told him a story because he's a storyteller and he wanted to uplift our main character.
Wow,
And
I did not know any of that. So you sent me just the story.
So this is the thing. There is, if you listen to the audiobook version, it is interspersed. There are points where other characters will break in, like breaking the fourth wall, and they're talking about the story. But what I sent you was my favorite rendition of it, where there is a guy who is a voice actor who took just the story that Hoyd told in that moment and just said that to make it one coherent.
So even though it's broken up in the book, he read it as an uninterrupted story. Okay, so when you sent it to me, I was sitting at dinner with my family, right. and I just turned it on and we listened to it, the whole thing. And my wife, who's read all these books, was kind of like, "Oh yes, of course," and everyone else was like, "What was the point of that?"
And so this story is The Dog and the Dragon, and link in the show notes because it is worth, like, you don't care about Brandon Sanderson, you don't read fantasy, fine. This is worth the 10 minutes it will take to listen to it. And it is so good. And it's so good to the point where, independent of each other, both of my kids, I went to them and I sat them down and I want you to listen to this story with me and then we're going to talk about it.
Oh, okay. Before you tell me what they thought about it, I want to know why you find it so resonant, because it didn't quite do it for me.
Oh, this is one of those times I'm glad that we record the podcast in separate states because I can't be in the same room with you right now.
So
how does this not just pluck at your heartstrings? How are you not tearing up at the end of this freaking story?
Okay, so it's this story that the teller kind of preambles as like, this story doesn't mean anything. And then they tell you this story of a dog that once see a dragon and is awed by its majesty and beauty and wants to become like a dragon, but recognizes that it's a dog and a dog can't just become a dragon. So it decides to break it up into 3 goals that he needs to accomplish. He needs to have shiny scales, he needs to be able to speak like humans, and he needs to be able to, what was the third thing?
Fly. He's a fly.
Fly. Okay. So, and the dog comes up with ways to kind of do these things. None of them perfectly, but all. And each step of the way is mocked by his peers as just being a foolish dog that isn't really like a dragon at all. And in the end...
Yeah, in the end...
the dog finally comes to his senses and realizes that it's all been futile and a waste of time.
I could punch you in the face. No, in the end, the dog did something amazing and that is beyond the capability of any of his peers, and is still so down on himself because he didn't achieve his initial goal of becoming a dragon. And
right.
This is what I made my kids listen to it for, because this is a classic tale of this person or this dog, this character achieved...
I deliberately truncated the conclusion to be the dog's point of view, not the moral.
You took that part like, oh, don't try to assign a moral to this preface way too seriously. Like, shut up. Obviously, there's a moral. And like,
yeah.
So
okay, but talk for a second about the point of the character of Hoyd telling you a story with a moral and telling you not to get a moral out of it. What's the point of that?
Because specifically, Hoyd has told Kaladin stories before, and Kaladin is constantly interrupting him in the middle of the story, like, oh, this is about me, isn't it? And Hoyd gets offended, like, no, I'm telling a story. Shut up and listen.
Even though it is.
So
he's trying to get through someone's defenses of seeing themselves from another perspective by recognizing that that person's trying to change them and resisting it.
Because if you tell somebody to their face, hey, you're amazing and you're worth it, you shouldn't be so hard on yourself, you have achieved amazing things, they're going to blow you off. You tell them a story like this one and make them analyze it like from an outside perspective, they will agree with you. And then you slowly shift their perspective and make them realize that you're talking about them. And then hopefully that feeling translates to the things that they have accomplished. And so I made my kids listen to this, and I paused it because they do 2 endings of the story. There's the first one where all these amazing things happens to the dog and the dog feels like a failure. And I stop it right there and I tell the kid, what do you think? And then my son's like, well, the dog still did a lot of really cool stuff. My daughter's like, wow, he's really mad at himself. And so they both kind of got it. And then I played the rest of it, which explains how the real, quote-unquote, real ending where the dog realizes that he's accomplished great things and is super happy. And then we talked about, like, it's super easy to get lost pursuing what you think you want, and then completely missing all of the things that you're gaining along the way.
Okay. Nice. That sounds like that was a great lesson with you and your kids.
Hopefully they this is one of those things that's like a seed that's going to rattle around in their kid brains. And then maybe when they're 37, it'll click and be like, holy crap, that was a great
I'm like
lesson.
The dog.
Yeah, I'm like the dog.
All right, cool. Well, I finished reading Creative Acts for Curious People by Sarah Stein Greenberg from the design school at the University of Stanford. And you'd kind of asked me what it was, and I'd said it's like a collection of activities that they make students do to help them practice the kind of thinking you need to do to be a good designer. So now that I'm done reading it, I picked out one exercise I want to describe that I think is a good example of what they were trying to do. Okay. She calls this Solutions Tic-Tac-Toe. It's a 3x3 grid, and on the grid there are 9 descriptors of the types of solutions you want to create. Physical object, simplest possible version, wild idea, product, combo of more than one square, service, destined to fail, fully loaded with all possible features, and digital experience. And then they give you a problem to solve, and you have to come up with a solution that fits into each of the 9 squares. The point is divergent thinking. Rather than thinking of design as converging on a single best solution, you realize that the value in design is in branching out and coming up with creative solutions that don't converge at all.
I like this. This is forcing you to think of like, well, me being a software guy, I assume that I can solve these problems with software. But if you force me to think about a physical process, that's going to change how I approach it. And maybe
even if you end up solving it with software.
Yeah, but that'll evolve my understanding of the problem and the ins and outs and the dynamics and the restrictions breed creativity. So
yep.
That's
in fact, she quoted another designer in the book, and the quote she said his name was Thomas Both, and she said, "Having restraints can help you generate ideas."
Oh, Thomas Both, you plagiarized Mark Rosewater. How dare you?
And I go back to my version of the quote, which is restrictions refine creative energy. Because if you don't have creative energy, restrictions don't make anything.
Ben, I don't have creative energy. I have energy that hates entropy. That's the only thing in my body. I don't make things because I want to create. I make things because I want to spite the universe.
Josh, I know that that's not true. And you have the shower to prove it.
No, but I only did that because it broke.
All right. So the example that they give in the book, here's the problem you have to solve. How do you prevent an ice cream cone from melting?
Ooh. How do you prevent there is no software solution to stopping an ice cream cone from melting.
Okay. So look at the grid, pick a square or two, and see what kind of solution comes to mind. And how do you prevent an ice cream cone from melting?
I need to stop an ice cream cone from melting. Okay. Simplest possible solution is make it cold. So that would be like in case you and the ice cream cone in a freezer. One of those big walk-in meat freezers.
I like it. To me, I thought you just cut out a chunk of styrofoam that will cover the top of the ice cream cone, in like a beer koozie.
Like a koozie for ice cream?
Yeah.
Hilarious. This is why this is why there's so much air in those like cake cones, is so the body heat doesn't transfer like directly into the.
Nice.
Oh yeah, Dairy Queen.
All right. Well, somebody already solved that one. You pick another square.
Wild idea. I want the wild idea. Okay, what's the craziest thing I can think of to stop an ice cream cone from melting? I want to carry around a backpack that has some kind of liquid nitrogen system that is creating a localized sub-zero atmosphere around my hand.
I thought the same idea. I imagined the jacket that Marty wears in Back to the Future 2. It has like a button you push and it cools your ice cream cone.
That's fantastic. Yes, I want to carry around 80 pounds of equipment to keep this ice cream cone rock solid.
All right, pick one more square.
One more square. Destined to fail. Okay. If I want a product that's going to keep an ice cream cone from melting that's destined to fail, like when it says destined to fail, is that like I'm designing it to fail or I know it's just not going to work?
You pick.
Okay.
I can't ask Sarah Stein Greenberg.
I just know it's not going to work. I'm going to get a little chunk of styrofoam, like a little cube, and just cover the ice cream with that because that's not going to do jack all nothing. Like it's still going to melt because there's just way too much surface area exposed.
All right, mine is going to be mine that's
feel
destined to
bad for
fail.
calling you out.
Mine that's destined to fail is a service where you have trained dogs that bring you new ice cream cones.
Oh, every time it melts? Ooh, I like that. Did you watch How I Met Your Mother?
No.
The entire last season, one of the characters went up to the bartender. It takes place at a hotel, and she says, what's your name? Linus? Linus. Anytime you see my hand not holding a drink, I want you to put a drink in my hand. And it was a running gag the entire show, is that anytime, like, she would get mad and, like, crush the glass or throw it against a wall or something, and the dude would materialize and hand her a new one.
That's it. That's my destined to fail solution for your ice cream cone melting, because I think the dogs aren't going to be able to handle it.
Dogs do love ice cream.
Okay. Josh,
so
I want to do a quick board game survivor.
Hey, hang on a second. Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa.
All right, fine. Back to that. Divergent thinking. It's sometimes people think in design that there's somehow out in the universe a best possible solution to a problem. Okay. And this is to get that idea out of your head. Like, you're not going to converge on the ideal form of a thing. You need to have ways to force your brain to go down fresh pathways so that you can be more sure that you are coming up with something good.
This makes me feel like the same conversation I try to have about car tires, rubber filled with air. Like, if we went back in time 1,000 times and reset, like, would we come up with the same solution? Would we still
come back to rubber tires filled with air?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
I don't know. Well, this says we should think about other things, at least.
Yeah, and people do. I've seen them. I watched a YouTube video this week about a Kickstarter that failed. It was a bike that came with tires that weren't filled with air, and it was the worst feature of the bike.
I still don't understand why they don't just sell bikes with solid rubber tires. Like, I get that it would be heavy and hard.
I watched a video of a guy wearing a microphone and a camera driving a bicycle that had solid tires, and it was like it rattled his bones on every tiny thing.
But
it's this buffer medium between us and the outside world.
I get that, but it's by far the thing that fails on kids' bikes. Like 100 times out of 100, it's the stupid tires.
Yeah, but it's also one of the most important things that makes it livable or unusable.
Have you met kids? They're pretty durable, and they don't care.
Okay, well, they graduated from tricycles that have solid rubber tires. I've never seen a tricycle with
big wheels that had solid plastic tires.
But their circle is the driveway and smooth paved surfaces.
All right, we're not going to solve this
I'm not
problem.
arguing that there isn't a better solution out there. There's also kind of...
There's got to be like a honeycomb rubber tire that isn't reliant on air pressure to stay up, but still gives you like the cushion that you're looking for. There's a middle ground here. The foam. The foam.
This dissatisfaction and frustration that you're experiencing is the creative energy that needs to be refined into good ideas.
I don't know what's more impressive, my hatred for every time you take something I say and turn it into a perfect transition, or your ability to take the random crap I say and turn it into a perfect transition.
All right. Well, speaking of frustrating things, I sent you a link to a online game called Simulation Clicker. You didn't try it, did you?
Ben, it's tax season, buddy. Like,
okay,
I've got 45 hours just.
We can pause for 2 minutes and have you try it.
Let's do that. Okay.
Okay. It's in the notes. Click on it and try it.
I'm not pausing. But
This is the Stanley Parable, if you know, but different.
Okay. Stimulation clicker.
It should come up to a blank page with "click me" like right in the center of the page, and that's it.
+1 stimulation per bounce costs 5. Oh, I get the DVDs and then I get my phone. Oh God, no! It's got the little video of the subway runner guy. I hate that thing. What does it do? Is that giving me more stimulation? Give me another one. Rain sounds. Oh, and it's raining. I can't hear you anymore. I'm just listening to rain and lo-fi beats, and I'm at 70 stimulation per second.
That's really you're a chump. That's a really low amount of stimulation per second.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh, well, shut up. Let me get there.
Take it to the next level.
Let me cook. Get good, scrub.
You can turn on a reaction YouTuber, a fitness instructor, a true crime podcast. There's other video games playing, the music, the sound effects that you get, draggers on your cursor as it moves around. There's loot boxes. Eventually, just all of this is happening at once. At some point, you're actually going to feel the feeling they're going for.
I see. You're going to feel overstimulated.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's on purpose. These aren't like fictional things that they made up just for the game. They're taking stuff in real life that actually exists that you do.
Yeah.
And while I was playing this game, I found myself like letting it kind of accumulate in the background and like checking my email. And then they add an email app in where it's like giving you fake emails that you have to answer in or giving you tasks to do.
Okay. That's cool.
And so it's in a really weird, gross kind of way. It's like you're in the Stanley Parable. Remember the game at the beginning of the Stanley Parable? Stanley sat at his computer all day and did what it said to do on the screen, and Stanley was happy. Like, this is it. This is what's happening on our computers. We are Stanley. We're sitting there at the computer doing all the things that it's telling us to do to get more and more stimulation. And when you do it all at once, it's ridiculous. It's a cacophony of sound. It's an assault on your senses. And yet, here we are doing it.
So my son and I played Cookie Clickers for about a month. And when I say we played Cookie Clickers, I mean we had a tab open to Cookie Clickers on a computer in the kitchen 24/7 for a month. Okay? And
wow. Did you need a new mouse after that?
Ben, only chumps actually click the cookies, okay? We were generating so many, we were millions, if not billions of cookies per second with all of the grandmas and all of the cookie mines and the eldritch horrors that were mining the cookies.
Okay, well, I'd never played Cookie Clicker before, but when I asked my son to come sit down and play Stimulation Clicker, he was like, oh, this is Cookie Clicker. I'm like, not really. He showed it to me, and I get that it's the exact same game underlying it, but this has the satirical element layered on top of it of representing what we're actually doing in our real lives.
Okay, you're right. So this has an excellent stimulation, but I'm not off a Cookie Clicker yet because the Cookie Clicker destroyed me in a way that very few games have. Where my son's like, have you ever seen this game Cookie Clicker? I'm like, no, what is it? And I lean over and he's like, oh, you click this cookie and then you can upgrade the stuff that helps you click cookies. I'm like, oh, that's dumb. And then
it's literally a self-licking lollipop.
Ben, the next morning, my son wakes up and I'm already awake at the computer and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, and I was explaining to him, like, okay, there's a threshold at which cookies per second, it's better to switch over from the farms to the mines, and it's right about 5,000 per second. And I've done the math, and here's the spreadsheet. And he's like, what are you doing? I am optimizing your freaking cookies. Don't come at me with this. Wow. And that's I don't know. There was like a point at that night when I had just started sitting down where 90% of my brain is like trying to optimize my cookies, and 10% of my brain is like, we're in some real trouble here.
Yeah, so it's at one point it adds a stock market applet in the corner where you can use your attention or your stimulation points to invest in the stock market, and it's just going up and down, and you can click on it, so you're kind of watching it, and you got the podcaster going in the background and Lo-Fi Girl playing and the DVD logos bouncing, and then it adds in Duolingo. That's and great. Now you got the little owl popping up and harassing you that you aren't doing your Duolingo lessons. Then it adds in a YouTube ASMR video where they're like crunching dough or something like that. The hydraulic press. Have you added the hydraulic press yet?
I did. I stopped playing. But, okay. Well, I didn't stop playing. It's in the background, and I've got a bunch of DVDs bouncing around for me. But I did add the hydraulic press, and yeah, that was making an annoying noise, so I didn't click it this time. Oh, an ad popped up if I want to upgrade my... Is that a thing?
Or then it adds... Ad? No, it's not. Then it adds in... what are they called? Achievements. So you got this giant table of like all the stuff you haven't done yet.
I mean, you got to have the stuff that you haven't done yet, just to taunt you with the stimulation that you haven't experienced.
It has a fake end user license agreement.
This is
all the data, none of the liability.
I love this because I've always heard this, like, overstimulation. Like, even at our local game store now, it's a great game store, and I've said that multiple times, and it has signs around like, if you're feeling overstimulated, ask an employee. You'll get complimentary earplugs or earmuffs, whichever's more comfortable. And I love that the place is so accommodating to offer those to people. But at the same time, I always think to myself, I'm not a person that gets overstimulated. Now, that said, I was playing that game for like 15 seconds, and with the rain, the thunder, the hydraulic press, and the lo-fi beats, and the bouncing DVD sounds all going at the same time, I was getting there.
Yeah, and you can. Have you ever seen a kid unironically looking at 5 screens? Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like somebody from Generation Alpha where they've got like 3 monitors up and different things going on all 3, and they're staring at their phone, and they've also got a Nintendo Switch open, and like they're unironically doing 5 screens.
Earlier today, I asked my daughter, do you want to watch this movie with us? And she said yes, unironically. And unironically, she had her iPad open with a YouTuber doing something while she was playing Minecraft on the Switch, while she was watching the movie we were watching. Like, I don't know how they could split their attention.
And if I came over to your house and asked her, Jane, did you watch that movie with your dad and your brother? She would just say yes. Like, she wouldn't parse it any more than that.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. She wouldn't. At the same time, that's bleeding into our society too. Like, my wife and I, when we go to watch TV at night after the kids go to bed, what that means is there's a TV show on, and we are both like looking at random articles on the internet.
Okay, so let me ask you this: what have you noticed will actually cut through all of that? Like, if you turn on a movie you've never watched before, and maybe you're not into it at first, and you're kind of surfing on your phone, what'll make you put down your phone and not pick it up for the rest of the time?
So I make the deliberate decision if we're going to sit down. Usually it's like a movie, like, oh, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch this movie. If I'm calling a movie out by title, I'm not picking up my phone because I have decided I'm going to watch this movie. Football games, we make an effort to, like, hey, we are sitting here watching this football game together. This is our quality time watching the Cardinals lose again. So let's not be on our phones while we watch Kyler Murray throw into the back of his offensive line because he's 5'3". I don't know why we paid so much for that guy.
Don't ever stop doing these NFL asides. I love them. All right, Josh, I asked you if you would do something for me. I didn't tell you the reason behind it. I guess I'll tell the reason now. I asked you, for our main segment today, if you would watch with me the movie Tron, and additionally the movie Tron Legacy, which came out 28 years later.
All right, so
because
Tron Legacy came out 28 years later, but my son, we're watching Tron Legacy. I'm like, man, this is such a great new movie. And he goes, this movie's 15 years old. And I almost hit him.
Yeah. Well, okay, so when Tron Legacy came out, they put a lot of it was as cutting edge for its time as the original Tron was for its time.
That was one of the first movies with like the digital de-aging technology, right?
Yes, exactly, which they used in there, as well as some of the other stuff that was going on. But let's not talk about Legacy yet.
Okay.
So the reason I brought this up is because I saw a teaser trailer for Tron Ares coming out in October of this year.
There's a new Tron movie coming out?
So, Josh, I asked you to watch Tron because the movie's coming out this year, and I wanted to go down memory lane, and because I have Disney Plus, I can go back and watch all these movies. So I put Tron back on again. Now, Josh, I have to give you a warning. My nostalgia vulnerability for this movie is off the charts. Whatever the maximum value is for this movie, that's what it is for me. It can't possibly get any higher. When I was a kid, I had this movie on VHS and I wore it out. Like, I watched this movie 100 times, literally 100 times. So watching it again is just like eating your favorite food. It doesn't matter if it's bad for you or if it's not that good or other people think it's great. To me, it's like, what's his name in Ratatouille, the food critic.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
When he takes the bite of Ratatouille and his brain flashes back to being a little kid in his mom's kitchen. That's it. So I get that not everyone loves this movie, and I'm kind of biased, but I still think I can make a case for why it's good.
Kind of biased. Like, this is my favorite movie of all time ever, and I will fight anyone that says it's not. I might be biased.
So Disney was looking to make a sci-fi intellectual property that was new and unique. And this guy, Steven Lisberger, comes along and he says, hey, I got these animators. Here's some cool stuff we're doing. If I had a whole bunch of money, I could do something really great. I have this vision for this world that's inside of a computer. What do you say? Disney writes him a blank check, gives him the resources they need, hoping they can launch a brand new property that was Tron.
And I mean, I'm going to agree with you. Like, I really like this movie, even though it is objectively not very good. Like, from a storytelling perspective, it's kind of a late 80s, or not even late 80s, early 80s movie where it kind of meanders and forgets what it's doing for a second. And they're like, oh crap, we got to wrap up real quick.
Yeah. The ending is so hasty.
Yeah, the ending is like 15 seconds and a throwaway line to explain like what happened. But we needed a full 3.5 minutes of Tron drinking liquefied electricity straight from the source and talking about how awesome it is.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so let's back up. This movie was considered a box office failure, but it made 3 times its budget at the box office. You know, they made it for $17 million. It made like $50 million, which I guess was just... That's the thing about expectations. You think something's going to do, and if it doesn't do that, even if it's the dog and the dragon, right?
Yes, yeah.
This is the dog. I mean, he was flying, he was speaking, he was covered in sparkly scales. It was awesome.
So I love this movie because, the story is a mess. The story is just a mess, but the choices that they make in the movie are great, and I love them. Almost like, all right, so this movie is so bad, it wraps around to being awesome again. Okay?
Okay, good.
There's a scene early in the movie like, oh, let's break into our building and do these illicit, pseudo-illegal things. Cool. How should we break in? Oh, obviously through the door that is 15 feet thick and takes a full 90 seconds to open. That's got to be the door that's unmonitored. Like, that's... Who thinks this way? I feel like somebody saw this giant door on their way to work and like, we've got to put this in a movie somewhere.
I love the physical security in this because this movie is about virtual security. They get through this 15-foot door. They walk in, immediately see a security guard, and he goes, oh, hey guys, working late, huh? They're like, yeah. That's it. That's problem solved.
One of them is persona non grata. Clearly somebody that's like their picture is behind the security desk. Like, do not let this person in. Do not let this guy in
under any circumstances.
And they didn't even have ID badges on. Like, I called that out too. Like, oh, hey, working late, huh? I'm like, that's the employee of the month, ladies and gentlemen. The worst security guard. Didn't even ask them for ID.
Okay, so Steven Lisberger had this vision for this world he wanted to create. And it took like 6,000 people because this was back in the day when computer graphics were brand new and they were manually programming coordinates into the computer because they couldn't look at them and create them at the same time.
So after this movie played, because I realized it was filmed in 1982. 82. Ben, I was born in 83. They didn't have computers.
Star Wars was made with little models on fake sets of the Death Star.
But you absolutely, you watch 5 frames of Tron, you realize there's no chance they did this practically. Because all of the characters are clearly filmed in black and white. And then there's glowing neon colors everywhere.
Yeah.
And I looked into it because I had to know how did they do this?
There was a team of 200 people in Taiwan hand painting every frame of this movie and mailing to them in boxes.
Oh, they did multiple exposures to composite these shots together. So they filmed the entire movie in practical in black and white, okay? And then they took the film of the black and white frame by frame and they would expose the frame 5 times with a rotoscope. Like they would blast it onto a piece of film that was like, it was bigger than a normal piece of paper, but they would do it 5 different times. One pass was like, okay, this is going to be just the characters' like faces and teeth. This one's going to be just the glowing bits of their clothing. This is going to be just the normal colored parts of their clothing. And then they had to composite these 15 frames together to get all the colors. And that's insane.
And then they would run them past you, and they'd be in their like post-production, and occasionally they get like 5 or 6 frames in a row that would flash real bright. And they didn't have time to go back and figure it out, so they just added sound effects and make it seem like it was part of the world.
Yeah, it was. So you're watching this, and it's a visual marvel for 1982.
It is. It was breathtaking.
But there are still some parts where it's very jittery. There's still some parts where it's like, oh, okay, they clearly screwed something up on one of those frames, but I can't point out what. And,
yeah,
but I mean, it was so awful. It was good.
Let's contextualize it a little bit more. I went back and read Roger Ebert, may he rest in peace, his review of it at the time in the Chicago Sun-Times, and he gave it 4 out of 4 stars, and just really praised the virtuosity and the change that was happening in the industry. He said after he watched this, he realized all things are possible. That's what this represented. This is one of the first movies to use computer graphics in the production of their special effects. It was so new that when it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Special Effects, the Academy refused to acknowledge it because they said using computers was cheating.
Wow. And that feeling that Roger Ebert wrote about is impossible for even our generation to capture, let alone our kids.
Yeah.
My kids watching this thing see better CGI made by a dude in his living room in 5 minutes because of the compute power that we have access to nowadays.
But it was because of guys like Steven Lisberger and his team pushing the boundaries of what's possible that made all this happen.
And all I can think about is the custom things that they had to build from scratch to make this work. And the amount of engineering and pioneering, actual pioneering, like, hey, how do we make a 3-dimensional object on film? Like, how do you get that to translate? They don't have digital film. They have actual 35 millimeter freaking camera film. How did they get the computer picture onto the film, Ben? They had to figure that out and engineer a solution for it.
And they were like using slide rules to come up with coordinates that they would type into the computer to get it to like move the light cycle on the grid.
I watched a clip of the making of After because I had to know some of these facts, right?
Yeah.
And one guy said something that, like, so Disney was thinking about this as an animation film, and we had to explain to them it's not because the computer can do things that animation can't. Like, what are you talking about? Okay, take any cell of an animation frame or the background. Typically in these animated feature films that Disney was doing at the time, they would paint an enormous landscape background if a character was going to go traipsing across it, and they would just pan the camera across it.
Right.
It's like, oh,
so they only had to paint it once.
Well, they only had to paint it once, but then what he's explaining is this picture, you can go left, right, up, and down, but you can't go in or out.
How do you do that?
Our computer, like stuff, they call it the Z-axis movement. We can create this digital world, and we can move deeper into it. This is a reason that that long shot where Finn is initially sucked into the computer, and you have this very long shot where it just keeps going in and in and in. Like, okay, how many?
Yeah, that's been mimicked 1,000 times since then, where you're just whooshing down this digital tunnel with flying blocks of grid-looking things and wires and
the world just keeps getting more and more defined as you're basically zooming into it. I was actually watching that scene and it said out loud, like, how many movies do we watch and love that are just Alice in Wonderland? Because that's what this was.
Okay, I love it. I love that you called it Alice in Wonderland. I'm going to one-up you on that. Here's my hot take. This was The Wizard of Oz. Because in Alice in Wonderland, she goes into another world. But in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy goes to another world, and everyone in that world is someone from the world she came from.
Okay. I'm with you. I like this, yes. If we're going to call Finn the Wizard. Finn is the wizard in The Wizard of Oz.
Flynn with an L.
Oh, Flynn. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just watched 2 movies where they said his name incessantly.
Okay, so yes, Flynn is Dorothy. He goes into it. I want to say one other meta thing, and then we'll get to the plot. Disney was in a lull of live-action movies. They were having success with their animation, but they hadn't had a hit in live-action movies for a long time.
They had Black Hole, which was going to be their Star Wars competitor, and if you've never seen Black Hole,
horrible.
It is one of my son's favorite films because he laughed maniacally about how bad it was the entire time.
Okay, good. That's the only thing it's good for. And meanwhile, they're pumping out sequels to Herbie the Love Bug. So this is their bid after Black Hole to have like a Star Wars like intellectual property. Interesting that they ended up buying Star Wars at some point down the line. Wow, how that world changed.
Not interesting. Just they were sick of having to try to compete with it.
Okay, so this movie, even though it was considered a flop at the box office, it was their best box office success for the next 5 years.
Ooh, for a live action movie?
Yeah, for a live action Disney movie.
What
5
a
years.
Terrible time to be working at live action Disney.
It's become a bit of a cult classic. The video games that were released after it made it more money than the movie did in the box office.
I remember playing Tron on an arcade box
Me
as
too.
a kid.
Last time I went to the Nickelcade here in town, I made a beeline for it and played a few games of Tron because I love that game. Okay, so let's go to the plot. I love that it starts out in Flynn's arcade and someone's playing one of these games and the camera zooms in on the back of them and then zooms in closer and you can see them playing the game and then it zooms in into the playing field and at some point the graphics change and you're in the world and it zooms all the way down till you can see a person driving the light cycle on the grid.
Yes, it was Sark going against what was the user, I guess?
Yeah, and then it zooms back out, and then it's back in the real world for a while. But you got a little bit of a taste of like, wait a minute, there's a whole world inside of there. I want to know more about that.
You know, for a guy that doesn't read fiction, you just expressed a lot of whimsy in that line.
It was a brilliant way to introduce the concept in the movie.
All right. Yeah, yes, I agree.
So, as we start to introduce the plot, now we cut to Flynn and his character, Clue, that looks just like him, driving a tank around, and he's obviously giving him the instructions of like a hacker. Like, hey, you're in the system, they're chasing after you because they don't want you in here, but I need you to find some information for me. And this little bit of him interacting with his program, Clue, is the whole conceit for the next film.
It is. Like that's like the kind of the premise. Now, that said, it is painful to watch. In the second movie got a lot better, but the first movie, anytime somebody's sitting at a computer and interacting with it, listeners, that is not how you interact with computers. Like, I know you all are spoiled with Windows and mouses and clicking and touchscreens, but back in the command line days, that's still, you didn't ask for a status report from your program that was actively doing stuff. That's not how this works.
But this is a brilliant way to abstract all that away. The way my wife described it when we were watching it is like, they don't sit around and mansplain to you what computers are like. They just do it in a way that's intuitive and let you catch up.
Yeah, even if it's wrong.
Right. So you've got Flynn talking to Clue, who's his program that's hacking. They never use the word hacking in this movie, but he's hacking into the NCOM system to try to find the data that's the evidence of the fact that someone had stolen all of his video game code and used it to become powerful in the company and oust him and fire him from the company.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that person is Dillinger. So Flynn's vision was to create an open, free world where information flowed freely, and Dillinger stole that, kicked him out, and then created his own program called the Master Control Program that was the opposite of that. It was meant to control everything and have everything go through it, and he created this restrictive
the Master Control
system
program,
that was the opposite.
The MCP was the perfect reflection of Dillinger, because Dillinger took somebody else's code, said it was his, and then profited from it. And the MCP, all it did was absorb and incorporate other pieces of software and other programs into itself to get better and bigger and smarter.
And at some point, the Master Control Program becomes sentient and gets out of control. It starts breaking boundaries, hacking into the Kremlin, hacking into the Pentagon, all these things that they said were going on. But basically, we've created an artificial intelligence that's become sentient, gotten smarter than us, and now thinks it has no need for us and is just looking for an opportunity to transcend us.
Well, its driving directive was to control everything to maximum efficiency. And so the world is a mess, and obviously I can do this better.
It's the paperclip problem. It's the central conflict in both movies.
Yeah.
Describe the paperclip problem.
So the paperclip problem is if you were to ever create a robot that could turn anything into paperclips, eventually it would just turn everything into paperclips, and it would do everything in its power to turn everything into paperclips. And if it decided that grinding humanity down into its distinct individual atoms to combine it into the nickel and iron that it needed to make more paperclips, then that's what it would do. And eventually the entire planet would just be paperclips.
Right. Now, there was a lot going on here philosophically. where there was this pseudo religion that was happening among the denizens.
Waiting for this. I was waiting for you to bring up the spiritual aspect.
I'm interested in your perspective on it, because they use the word religion and they talk about it like it's faith. But the economy of it is that all these programs in the system represent their user. And they talk about this from both directions. I think Walter was his name, has the program Dumont in the system. And he says, even if you fire us from this company and we go away, our soul is still in the system because we're the ones that wrote the programs.
Yeah, our spirit is still in the programs that we wrote and it's running. And that's kind of the line that explains why the programs are played by the actors of the programmers who wrote them.
Yeah.
And that's a fun little touch.
And then the reverse perspective is that the programs are sentient. They're in the system doing what it is they've been programmed to do, but they don't get to see the users, so they don't know for sure if they're really there.
But some have more, like
but
Tron
they believe in them because somebody
believe.
says, like, how would we exist if the users didn't create us?
Yeah, like Ram said that. It's like, well, where did I even come from? Who made me if not for the users? But then Tron has interacted with his user the same way Clue did. Like, there are programs that have direct access to the users, and they just know. So it's like kind of a weird religion where it's like a religion if we had a religion in the world where like 10% of the people in the religion have actually spoken to God directly, irrefutably. But there are still people somehow on the fence like, I'm not so sure.
Sark, meanwhile, is operating under the direction of the Master Control Program. Sark is kind of like Dillinger, but in the system. But the Master Control Program's out of control, and he has no choice but to enforce his will. And it's this weird, like, dictatorial regime that's oppressing the people that believe in the religion of the users. They're trying to quash and purge the system of the idea that the users are up there.
You get the real vibe that the Master Control Program wants all the programs to just worship him instead of the users. There is no higher authority than the Master Control Program.
Right. So Tron fights for the users, and Sark is forcing them to play in the games until they are either de-resed or believe in disavow their belief in the users.
Can we talk for a second about how whoever wrote Sark's lines had no idea what they were doing with this character?
Okay, here's what I think they were doing with this character. Tell me if you didn't get this vibe. Sark is Darth Vader, and the Master Control Program is the Emperor.
I didn't get that vibe. I got that the
Think of the scenes when he goes into that booth where it like encloses around him, and the Master Control Program's like using the Force to crush him. Be like, don't fear the users, fear me. Don't fear the Force, fear my power.
I got the vibe that the Master Control Program couldn't walk anywhere because he was one of the IO Guardians, and so he needed Sark because Sark could move around and stuff. But Sark was like a weird lackey. I don't know what his role was because like his lines were just so dumb. Like, I don't get it. Are you the incompetent henchman or are you the indispensable number two? Because you keep flipping back and forth in this role and I don't get it. And it's like, oh, you should send me some real challenges. Like, we brought some programs from Strategic Air Command. Nice.
I like that they threw Strategic Air Command out there.
Well, I just like that I like that Sark was like, it was silent for 3 seconds, and then Sark went nice, and then it was silent for 5 more seconds. Like, this is just a weird line and a weird line delivery.
But you have to think about the time. This was 1982. It was the middle of the Cold War. This was the height of the Red Scare.
I know that. The Strategic Air Command and hacking the DoD and the Kremlin, yes, these are all bad things that we don't want the Master Control Program doing. And the Strategic Air Command must have the best programs ever. Hint, peek behind the curtain, listeners, if you've never worked in the government, our computer systems are at least 3 decades behind what is out in on your desktop right now.
I also enjoyed that Sark, even though he was fighting this battle of trying to get the programs to disavow their belief in the users, when he found out that Flynn was there and that he was an actual user, Sark was kind of like, wait a minute, I'm kind of afraid of this.
Hey, boss, I saw him do actual magic. Like, he put his hand into a stream of energy that should have annihilated him.
Okay, great transition. Let's talk about the magic system of Tron.
You do this every time.
Okay, hard or soft?
Oh my God. Soft. Holy crap. This is the softest ever. Okay, I have to, for a second, I have to do this because I love to nitpick stupid things in movies. Who puts their terminal in the line of fire of the laser?
Of the laser.
Oh, this laser is going to disintegrate anything in its path.
It was Chekhov's laser.
So I'm going to put my computer right on the other side of it. That's okay.
I think at one point, Laura or whatever her name is even says that. She's like, I've got this terminal right here in the path of the laser. I don't know why.
Yeah, so, all right, let's talk about, we're just going to have this laser that suspends your matter, and it's suspended in the laser and then digitizes it all. It's like, okay, is this 1982 where computers can barely, come up with graphics? Or is this, 3153 where quantum teleportation is just a thing we do now?
Okay, I'm going to save this until the end, but yes, I think this is the fatal plot hole of this whole thing. Okay, so soft magic system. Flynn is naturally good at the games. He's the one that wrote the programs for the games. So when he comes in, he's like, oh, these are games I wrote. I'm good at this.
No, hang on. There's a difference between writing a game and then playing, what is that, hi-fi? What's the name of that game?
So well. They match. Okay, first of all, I think Tron kind of lives as a soft spot in a lot of programmers' hearts, and so I was on the lookout for things from Tron that people used. Do you remember the name of the first person that Flynn played a game against when he got sent into the system?
Ooh, it was the
it was an accounting program, and his name was Chrome.
Chrome. I did not know that. Oh, and that's and then the browser for browser. Yeah, it is Chrome.
I think that there could be a relationship there.
So anyway, Alan was sitting at his desk in his cubicle waiting for Tron to contact him, and he had a banner at the top of his cubicle, and the banner said "Gort Klatu Barada Nikto."
Yes, I noticed that too, and I never did as a kid because I was on VHS on an old TV, and there was no possible way I could have read that.
So that is a line from the 1951 science fiction film A Day the Earth Stood Still. That is the line that the alien tells the robot to stop it from destroying the planet.
So Tron's creator, what a great reference. So Tron's creator, Alan, was a nerd among nerds. Now, when you were looking at his cubicle, did you notice that they had a matte background on that scene where it looked like the cubicles inside of NCOM went on for literal ever?
I called that out. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of cubicles. And my son goes, holy crap, that is a lot of cubicles. I'm like, yeah, not a single structural pillar in sight. This is just the ocean of lost programmers. This is where programmers go to die, is one of these cubes.
And then at the end, from the roof, they were in Center City, but it was filmed in Los Angeles. It fades from daylight to black, and you see all the cars going back and forth on the grids of the street of the city, and you can kind of see how the city looks like the system. Yeah. And there's this kind of parallel worlds of how we've created this system that reflects our own reality.
Or that the system reflects our reality because the spirit of the systems we create reflect the reality that we live in the canon of the world.
Very nice.
We thought the helicopter was cool. They put a bunch of lights on the helicopter.
Yeah.
I don't think that's legal. I don't think you're allowed to have a helicopter outlined.
So mostly the magic system is the fact that Flynn was a living human being and gets sent down into the computer world, and now has powers that programs don't.
It's like he can put his hands out and try real hard and recombine code somehow, or transfer energy or stop something from being deleted.
Okay, so he can heal stuff. He's kind of like a battery. I think at one point Ram says to him, "You shouldn't be able to do that." When he makes the ship come back together.
Okay, crap. So I just realized something. Okay. So the big carrier they were on is like, oh, you'll all be deleted automatically when I leave the ship, and it starts deleting the ship, but it doesn't delete Finn, and Finn keeps the ship together.
Flynn.
I keep doing that. I just realized that's because Flynn he isn't code. Well, he had higher access. He was logged in higher than the authority that was trying to delete the ship. And so he just said, no. And it's like, oh, well, he's a super user and I'm just administrator. So no, I can't.
So his code didn't get deleted.
Yeah, exactly.
He can channel energy. He says, elementary physics, a beam of energy can always be diverted. So even though it's a soft magic system, it's showing that he's a nerd and he's using his nerd knowledge in ways that the programs can't understand.
Maybe, or maybe it's just a little Deus Ex, we've been sitting around for too long. We need to add a little tension for a second.
He has a little bit of like intuition. I don't know that they really explain that, but he kind of has a feeling when things are going to happen or something's different. That's kind of like Neo in the Matrix after he becomes self-aware. It's the same kind of idea. I bet this movie influenced that.
Maybe it's just maybe it's just it's convenient for the plot if the person just supernaturally knows that things are happening over there.
At the end, he jumps into the Master Control Program's beam. He doesn't have a reason to know why that's going to solve the problem that they have, but it does.
He doesn't know what's going to happen at that point. Somehow that I.O. tower is also connected to the laser and ejects him, even though he was imported someplace completely different from where the Master Control Program is.
Okay, so it's a soft magic system.
It's soft? Dude, this
fun.
This is the squishmallow of magic systems, okay? Like, you think it's going to stop squeezing and it just keeps going.
In 1982, video games existed, but the graphics were so bad. But to see this movie where like a human goes down in a video game and they reach down and grab a bar and they're suddenly driving a light cycle in a grid, it brought it to life in a way that I felt like translated into other video games that really gave me a sense of reality that I couldn't otherwise have had.
It's fascinating to me that you can suspend your disbelief for a movie that's this bad. And yet I spoon feed you some of the best fiction of our time, and you throw it back in my face. I just couldn't get into it.
There's a time warp happening. There was a time when I could have done all of that. It's died, but it's still inside of me.
That's the problem. I am spoon feeding the wrong version of Ben Rich.
That's right.
All right, I'm going to invent
1982
time travel.
Ben would have been all about this.
I'm going to invent time travel just to fix your thing on fiction.
Okay, enough about the magic system, but man, it was magical to see Flynn go down in there and he's in this room and the graphics are pretty good where he's on this grid where he's like bouncing the energy ball off the ceiling to make the rings disappear. Or, okay, let's talk for a second because it's hard to beat lightsabers. Like once lightsabers have been invented, every weapon is second after that. But disc combat is really cool.
So I'm not going to lie. Yeah, disc combat. Like, as soon as you said lightsabers, I'm like, ooh, he's right. This is definitely in the top 5 with lightsabers as far as how awesome the weapons are. I want some kind of laser frisbee that always returns to me like Captain America's shield.
And here's what my son pointed out about it that made it really strategic and made for really interesting combat. It can be either offensive or defensive, but not both at the same time.
Yes.
So you have to be really strategic in the way you employ it.
As soon as you let go and it's an offensive weapon, it is no
Your
longer
guard is
available
down.
for defense. Yes, you're correct.
Yep.
And then was the guy's name in the second one? Rezler or something, where he split his into 2. Ugh. It's like, ooh,
yeah.
Ooh, we know this is the big bad here. That's the
right.
Darth Maul.
It was like
moment.
Darth Maul getting his second blade on his lightsaber.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Throughout all of this, Jeff Bridges as Flynn is having a ball. There, you can make another version of this movie where he comes back out of this system with PTSD. He's like, I almost died like 10 times. But every time he doesn't die in the system, he's kind of like, that was pretty cool. Like, let's do something else. He's smiling the whole time. He's laughing. He's got a ton of one-liners. That ebullient energy just really is contagious for me, and it's part of the reason I love this movie so much and think it's so fun.
Well, he was playing highlight with Chrome, and then like the Chrome, he's clearly beating him, and he's very happy about it. Like he thought he was just playing a video game, and then somebody tells him, "Kill him," and then he flips or turns on a dime and screams into the void, "No!" I'm like, that's a weird character moment. Like, shouldn't you be a little more confused about the stakes of what's happening right now? But okay, that's fine. He felt very rushed from, oh, these are all computer programs and I don't care, to these are my friends and I will die for them.
I don't think that was it. I think it was Flynn is an independent thinker. It's part of why he was trying to hack into the system. You can't tell me what to do, Dillinger. You're my enemy. It was even the voice of Dillinger.
So if he had shouted, "Let him live," he'd have been like, "Never," and then killed Crumb.
Maybe. I don't know. Just rebelling against Dillinger. Now, Sark or Dillinger, he's, he has this real world conflict with the old guy. This was a really interesting the baby boomer, or maybe even the silent generation that were on the cutting edge of their time and invented computers. And now you got the next generation comes along that wants to say, hey, old man, thanks for inventing this, but you're irrelevant now. Get out of here. And you can see that tension happening.
Yeah. Why'd you lock us all out of the system? Because I had to. It's like, well, that's not fair. Shut up, old man. Get out of my office.
Yeah.
An office, by the way, that's larger than my house for some reason.
With this beautiful... Yeah, they spent like half of their budget building that set for that office with the giant glass table with a touch keyboard and screen built into it.
Mr. Dillinger, the accounting is online too. They have some questions about all this decor that you've purchased.
So the movie starts right off with the MCP calling Dillinger back from a tech conference. He flies back in a helicopter, runs into his office, and logs in so the MCP can boss him around. I mean, obviously the stakes are really high when real-world humans are being bossed around by a self-aware computer program.
Two things. One, coolest desk ever. Giant black glass that is actually his computer that you can't see the buttons unless they turn on. That's fantastic. But two, ergonomic nightmare. You cannot stare straight down at your desk all day working on a computer. That's going to do terrible things to your neck and upper back.
Yeah, but it looks cool on film. Okay, so there's a scene where Alan and Laura go to find Flynn at the arcade to ask him if he's the one been trying to hack into Encom. And this is another one of those, like, something I think jumped into the real world. As he gets ready to give the exposition that he's not just trying to hack in to steal something, but he's actually trying to find the data to make his name clean, he says, set the Wayback Machine for 5 years ago. That's the name of a website. I think it got named after this movie.
Oh, come on. The Wayback Machine was from Mr. Peabody from the Rocky and Bullwinkle show.
Oh!
That's the time.
Yeah! Okay, so that's what Flynn was referring to. Okay, all right, I take it back. Well done. Deep cut by you.
I used to watch that show before school when I was a kid.
Okay, so let's skip to the end. I have a ball every time I watch this because I love the games, like the disc combat, the light cycle races, the tanks, the energy ball bouncing, all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, the plot's kind of moving on with the stakes and Sark watching over everything and Flynn trying to help.
Our light cycles go from Mach 3 turning 90 degrees on a dime to now we have to Tokyo drift carefully around every corner for some reason.
That was a limitation of the CGI. It was about the trails behind the light cycles. Anyway, this is interesting, the plot, in that Flynn is the protagonist, but Tron is the hero.
Oh, I like that. You are correct. Flynn was kind of there helping the real person achieve this. He was just, you're right. He was the supernatural help that the hero of the story gets.
Yeah, but Tron doesn't change. Like, he's just believes in Alan the whole time, and he's trying to accomplish his mission, and he accomplishes it. But Flynn's the one that's changing, and he's just kind of weaving in and out of Tron's hero arc.
This goes back to our Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland type of thing, where we're just caught up and swept in these events with all these unchanging characters. Right,
exactly. Okay, so at the very end, Flynn helps Tron defeat the Master Control program, basically delete his code, restore order to the system, and create it more... this really was the height of the Cold War. This was red versus blue. Everything went from being red to everything became blue. This was democracy defeats communism.
Hooray! Because we will always triumph. Can I call out one weird thing for a second?
Sure.
Okay. At the climactic end of this movie, Flynn, in a weird way, like, makes out with the program that looks like his ex-girlfriend, who's currently
I don't know why there's hugging and kissing. This is one of my questions.
Well, so he makes out with somebody that looks just like his ex-girlfriend, which is weird, objectively weird,
and awesome.
But then this program who looks like his ex-girlfriend, who's with Tron, who looks like her current boyfriend, then goes and makes out with Tron, like, immediately after, and we as the audience are just like, yeah, that's fine. Like, this is not okay.
This is a precursor to digital love-making devices.
Well, and Tron even mentions, when she makes out with him, he goes, that was nice. This is not a thing that the programs did before Flynn made out with this program. So this means that this was an unwanted physical thing that he did to somebody that looks like his ex-girlfriend. This is so screwed up.
I have a completely different take on it. Flynn's stuck in the digital world. He's still got the hots for his girlfriend, but she's moved on. She's got another guy in the real world. But until I go back to the real world, I can still have my fantasy with this approximation of my girlfriend. It's like her clone.
Ben, that's so much worse. That's so bad that you think that's okay. It's like, oh, I have the opportunity with no repercussions. I might as well physically assault this thing that looks like my ex-girlfriend.
She kissed him back. Don't misrepresent it.
They didn't know what kissing was until he did it to her.
She was hugging people. I don't know why there was hugging and kissing in the digital world. That should have. That was just that was a mistake by whoever wrote it and directed it.
Well, because it's the 80s, Ben. The hero or the protagonist, or both
Sure.
in this case, have to have a romantic love interest.
I know. I used to watch episodes of MacGyver, and within an hour's time, he met and kissed a girl.
You
every
cannot
episode.
have a male hero in a triumphant pose on the movie poster unless he is being clasped by a female love interest. That is the
she
law.
on the movie posters like that?
Yeah. Like Tron is
Okay.
standing triumphantly in the beam of light with his frisbee over his head, and she is next to him, like doing the Conan the Barbarian thing, like grabbing his leg or whatever.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
funny
every
because he's
80s
on the
ever.
movie poster, Tron, as the hero, but Flynn is the protagonist. Anyway, so they defeat the Master Control Program, turn everything from red to blue, go out, and then there's like maybe 1 minute of film after that in the movie where Flynn comes out, he's got the piece of paper, it's just plain text on dot matrix saying that Dillinger stole his program.
And that's apparently enough to get Dillinger fired and make Flynn
And
the
Flynn the
CEO
president of the
company.
company. Yeah.
I love this. It's like, so based on like, oh, you stole something 5 years ago? Like, how bad are you as a senior vice president that this one tiny excuse of something you did 5 years ago gets you fired? You must be awful at your job.
Yes. Here's my hot take on this, where they completely missed the boat, whoever it was that made the plot to this movie, what they failed to realize. They had created a device that didn't break or wasn't unrepeatable or didn't have any drawbacks, that took a human being and digitized him. They invented the best system of human transport or even object transport ever made. And he comes out and uses the piece of paper to reclaim his rights for having written some video games and becomes president of the software company
Right.
again.
He mentions that, like, oh, can it get me to Hawaii? And like they like just a throwaway line in the movie. Like, that's the whole point. Like, we are literally teleporting people through the internet in 1982.
Right. If we can fast forward 30 years in the future, it shouldn't be that Encom is now an even bigger software company. It should now be the entire world is filled with laser portals because Encom invented teleportation technology.
Absolutely correct. 100%.
All right. So, Tron Legacy.
Okay. Best part about Tron Legacy, and I pointed this out to my kid. One, I'm skipping all over the place and I don't care. One, he finds this massive computer from the 1980s still running for 20 years straight. Not a thing. Not a thing. There's no chance. There's
He
no
goes into the
version
secret
of
lair in the basement of the arcade and just turns it on, and it's like,
there's no
good to go.
version of this universe where a computer from the 1980s could run for 20 years uninterrupted without falling to pieces.
Okay, internet rabbit hole. So recently I've started watching YouTube channels of guys that basically collect and refurbish old technology. And there's a lot of pride taken by these guys in like not doing anything newer than a certain time.
Okay.
So if they rebuild an Apple II from 1983, they don't put any parts newer than 1983 in it.
Oof, that must be really difficult.
It is. So you got to have a community, a network. Remember, it was like 50 episodes ago when I went to this computer warehouse in Texas.
I remember that.
Shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
This is a gold mine for guys like this. They go to this place and find all these parts, and there's something they do when they're rebuilding an old computer and trying to get it be new today, but from 1983. They call it a smoke test.
Oh, geez. Okay.
You turn it on and hope
There's no
the smoke doesn't come out.
That's wow. Yeah. So no chance. Nothing from the 80s is going to run for 20 years uninterrupted. The
Right.
second thing that I loved to death was the massive compute power. This whole room in this basement was full of computing equipment.
Uh-huh.
And here we are, 2010, and this kid downloaded everything in there to something that he could
Into
put
a
on
thumb
his
drive?
neck. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a fun scene where he runs into the server room and hacks in the middle of the board meeting so that he can dump the source code for their next operating system. There was a lot going on in that scene where you got this room full of board, through executives talking cynically about the release of their next operating system, how it doesn't add any value except to the shareholders.
I love that he ran into that server room, and my son's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "That's a server farm." "What's a server farm?" "It's a room like that. It's full of computers. It has a white floor that is elevated. There's a bunch of wires." He goes, "Does it really look like that?" And I said, "No, it would be much, much brighter, and it would be deafeningly loud and incredibly cold."
Right. But yeah.
But other than that, they kind of nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so again, it's the paperclip problem again, except this time it's Clue, which was Flynn's program that he made for infiltrating the system 30 years ago.
Cloned now he's utility.
Somehow he's come back. If they explained it, I don't know how. Clue's come back.
If they explained
it, just tell me.
They explained it. Flynn couldn't be there all the time, and so he had to have a body double that was there working towards his goal while he wasn't there because of the time dilation.
Oh, so Flynn just recreated Clue.
But there was a flashback that Clue was having. Clue found Flynn's secret hideout and was looking at the stuff in there and had a flashback.
I was just thinking about the fact that in the first Tron movie, Clue got stomped on by a recognizer and was de-rezzed.
Oh, he made a new Clue. He was in the system. He leaned on the ground. The mirror came up. He put his hand on it, and then it rotated, and there was another one of him there, and he said, "You are Clue. I am Clue. You will make the perfect system. I will make the perfect system." You don't remember that scene?
Okay, so he's set the paperclip machine in motion.
Yeah, well, because he told him, prime directive, make the perfect system.
Okay, so he's doing that. This is the problem. This is the AI dilemma. He's created a program that's supposed to make paperclips, and it's making paperclips. And at some point, he realizes there's enough paperclips, and maybe it's starting to break things to make paperclips. And he's like, "Wait, stop making paperclips!" And it's like, you can't tell me what to do.
This is okay. Back to Brandon Sanderson in the Cosmere. There is this sword. It is called Nightblood, and it is one of the best characters in the book because it is a sentient sword that was made, and the person that made it was talking about okay, we had to use this incredible amount of magic to animate the thing permanently, and we had to give it a directive. And they gave it one directive, and that is destroy evil.
Yeah.
No, not kill. Destroy
evil. That's right.
But the problem was the sword has no concept of what's evil, and so it just destroys everything.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that. You made me read that one.
It was Warbreaker. I did make you read that one.
Okay, so now Flynn, then we flash back to Flynn's middle adulthood where he has a son, Sam. He has one night where he explains the whole system to Sam, tells him, "I'll tell it to you tomorrow," and then promptly disappears and is gone for 20 years.
Because his idiotic system doesn't let him get out of the stupid computer when he wants to. That was dumb.
So fast forward 25 years, Sam's now an adult. Because of his heritage, he actually owns a controlling share of shares in Encom, but he's abdicating his responsibility to actually run the company. So there's some evil CEO that's running the company instead. And then Sam gets a message from his father in the system and again gets digitized and sent into the system. And now we're in the system.
Except it wasn't Flynn texting his son. It was Clue texting Alan, trying to change the stalemate that they had been experiencing for what in the computer world would have been 1,000 years with the time dilation.
Oh, so I forgot to talk about that in the magic system. Yes, there's this relativity happening where lots of time is passing, but they measure things in microseconds in the system that's an instant in the real world.
I was actually trying to measure it because I wanted to know what the actual time dilation was, and it seemed
Did they bother?
They didn't. They never explained it outright. But Flynn, it felt like Flynn was in the original system for at least 2 full days because there was a point where he slept. And he was only gone from the real world for a handful of hours. Okay? So we can translate hours to days. And so Flynn was gone for 20 years. So if that's an order of magnitude, he was gone for a century, essentially, is what he must have felt like in the second movie. But
then he was aging at the real world rate while he was in the system? Is that what was happening?
Oh, here's the question that's really going to cook your noodle. What happens when we take this system off of a 1980s computer running at 300 megahertz and put it onto a modern system like that thumb drive that's clocking, 8 gigahertz? Is the time dilation going to get worse?
I don't know. I don't think it's meant to stand up to this kind of scrutiny. Okay, so when I watch Tron, I see something that was revolutionary for its time, that was ebullient and interesting and engaging and captivated my imagination and had memorable characters and interesting plot. And when I watch Tron Legacy, I just feel like I took a bad nap.
Oh, Ben. Oh, we have opposite reactions to this movie.
Okay, good. Tell me about your reaction to Tron Legacy.
So the original Tron is so bad it wraps around to being awesome again. I will put a caveat, except for the sound design. Like the composer,
not the music. The sound
music,
is great.
You're right. The sound is great. The composer, it's like the composer walked in. It's like, I've got an illness, and the only cure is more synthesizer. And like I hated it. But the second,
okay,
so
fair.
Again, so bad it's awesome, except for the music. Now, Tron Legacy, like that.
Okay, they hired Daft Punk to write the soundtrack, and they won like all kinds of awards for it. This is the French techno duo.
They were in the movie. I saw them.
With $1 billion budget and their chains taken off.
So this is the thing. They're both revolutionary for their time, but like I just the modern one, like it looks so much better, and it's I don't know, it's more fun. I like the modern one. I like the modern one better. It's
so
still,
the modern one
plot is just as stupid, but it looks so much better.
The modern one had a $170 million budget. They did some revolutionary things with like de-aging, even though Clue fell squarely in the uncanny valley where it just looked like a weird Jeff Bridges.
That added to the fact that he was a program in my mind. I was abstracting that.
That's
away.
fine. And it had this great soundtrack by Daft Punk and these beautiful visualizations that were like, if you had the 1982 version of Tron, but 30 years later, how awesome would it be? Now, instead of just racing on a flat grid, you're in 3 dimensions and you're going up and down levels and upside down. And I was bored by all that.
I 100% want to own a long coat that has lights on the inside, like underglow for a car, but in my jacket.
Okay. Everywhere in this world, there were clouds, but like never rain. And I didn't know why. It just felt like they had this big special effects budget and they didn't want the back to just be this void of nothing. So they put clouds in it, but there was no reason for it and they didn't explain it.
Well, they did explain in the making of the original one, they didn't want a sun in the Tron universe because there's no like one source of energy. Everything is energy. Everything has its own light. And so they just kind of carried that forward to this one. But like you said, they didn't want it to be a blank, boring void. You have to have, who was it? The aviator, the guy that made
Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes. He recognized like they were trying to film a movie with aerial combat, and it didn't look exciting or intense enough because there was no frame of reference because the blue sky didn't give you a sense of how fast these planes were going. And so they had to wait for cloud cover to come in to give you a sense of the scale and the speed of things that were happening. Same thing with this movie. If you're going to have a bunch of dynamic things happening, the clouds are going to give you a sense of scale and dimension.
So the recognizers, those ships with 2 feet were flying around. Now they had like jet wash coming out of the bottom of them. And the light cycles now, instead of just whooshing like they were powered by electricity, they now had like spinning turbine engines. And that just brings up confusing questions that confound the magic system. Like, what did they use? Fossil fuels? Is there like air pressure? Like what? None of this stuff makes any sense. It's supposed to be the digital world. Like, I don't think these things they did creatively with their special effects made any sense.
You look me in the eye and tell me that protagonist running in slow motion with the slow pan with him, and he dives into the air and the motorcycle manifests around him. You tell me that wasn't an awesome shot.
It was awesome. And it was the reason I went to the theater back in 2010 with all of the joy in my heart that came from watching Tron 100 times as an 8-year-old and came away a little bit disappointed. Because, that moment of running and jumping into a light cycle was great, but the plot in that movie was so uninspired.
The plot, the plot was uninspired. It was really dumb, but they made some good choices. I love that Flynn's character is an old Zen hippie now. All right, so let's take this, what we saw in the first movie of Flynn and his persona. isolate him with no human beings for 200 years. What's that person turn into? He turns into a weird hippie philosopher guy. Like a weird 70s monk
who adopted this girl of uncertain relationship.
Okay. My wife ruined
played by Olivia Wilde.
My wife ruined this movie for me because we were talking at the end about the weird thing so the end, spoilers everybody for a 15-year-old movie.
Tron Legacy.
She gets brought into the real world and I immediately go, is she real? Does she have blood? Your first stop needs to be a doctor. Because
like when Barbie crossed over at the end of Barbie, she goes to a gynecologist to figure things out.
So then we just started talking like, he's just gonna what? Like, he's just gonna date this girl now, this weird not human person thing. And she's like, oh yeah, that banged her dad, that banged his dad. And I was like, what? Like, oh yeah, the dad totally slept with Olivia Wilde. Like they were there for what, 200 years? I'm like, no, they didn't. Like, and my wife's like, yeah, they did. In the tone that's like, oh honey. But, and I don't want to think of it. I was like, no, he adopted her because he was protecting her. Like he loved her like a daughter. And my wife goes, okay, so now he's banging his sister. Like, you are ruining the climax of this movie for me.
But that was part of it was that he didn't create her. That was the plot point that I think was supposed to bring all this out. That in creating all of this system, somehow an accident manifested, and it was the kind of accident that created new life. I think harkens back maybe to the origin of man. That all this stuff was happening, and suddenly something new and interesting happens. Don't squash it, nurture it, and find out what it's going to do.
And this is the idea, and this is the reason he was so excited. This whole thing, like he created all of these conditions, and then these things just manifested from nowhere. It's like religion, science, history, all of it's going to get thrown on its head because of this. And like, that might be a bit of a stretch, but I can understand how excited he would be about digital, but this isn't life.
Spontaneous, unique life forms.
No, but let's make this very absolutely clear because the programs seem sentient in the computer world. But like Ram, the guy who died in the first movie, was an actuarial program, and he was very proud of the fact he was an actuarial program.
He wanted to help people have insurance.
Ben, in 1982, there was not a single piece of actuarial software that was sentient, okay? So while he felt sentient in the computer world, he was just a piece of calculating software in the real world. So these manifesting like isomorph programs, it's like digital life. No, this is random code that does random nonsense. Who knows if it's useful in the real world?
I think that is the killer innovation of the Tron IP. That when you start in the very first frame of the first scene of the first movie, you're watching somebody play a video game that's just grainy pixels moving across the screen. But when you zoom all the way in, the program's going, ah, and crashing into the wall and his existence is ending. Like, that's so interesting. It takes something that looks really boring on the surface and turns it into something nuanced and emotional. Okay. So I think the most interesting thing the plot of Tron Legacy had going on was this conflict of a 27-year-old boy who suffered from the fact that his father, for all intents and purposes, abandoned him. In fact, you can abstract the digital world away and just be like, what does happen to a 27-year-old male whose father abandons him when he was 12? Because that happens.
That happens all the time. Most of them don't become the single shareholder of the world's most, like, a freaking GE. You know what I mean?
I think this is the most interesting and engaging part of the plot, and they almost fail to even delve into it.
Yeah, he meets Clue the first time, and he thinks it's his dad, and like you can tell something is off there because he finally figures out that's not his dad, and this guy does not care about him, not one iota. But then he meets Flynn, and I do appreciate that Flynn immediately gets up and gives him a hug. Like, because that's what you would do after 200 years of not seeing your son.
Right. Hug your dad.
But then immediately goes, I need to think. I need some silence. I need to go meditate about this for like half an hour. I'll see you at dinner. Like, ooh, that's a very 70s parent type of thing to say.
Yeah, and it just and then that was the last time they dealt with it. The kid gets over it. He doesn't have any more resentment or frustration or anger towards his father, and it's all just healed and done, and they took what was potentially the most interesting part of this whole plot and just completely failed to exploit it.
Oh, because the visuals and the action were much cooler than two people talking about their feelings for 2.5 hours.
That's why I felt like it was so empty. Just whooshing engines and spinning turbines and clouds in the sky and not a brain in their head. Daft Punk music and beautiful visuals and just wasted. It
might have been a more interesting movie. I agree with what you're saying. If they explored that character development a little bit, I don't know. They kind of put a ticking clock on it, and he didn't meet his actual dad until like really long into the runtime of the movie. So if he did harbor this animosity or like just wanted to stick it to his old man or like whatever the emotional journey would have been there, I don't think they had time to tell it.
The whole tenor and mood of the movie is kind of dour and subdued. And Tron, on the other hand, even though Flynn could have come out of that computer system with like a lifetime of PTSD, just thought of it as fun. Like, hey, I got to go live in my favorite video games I wrote. Like, I almost died 10 times, but that's okay. I didn't.
He was, so the part
and
of that...
he smiled and he quipped and he made one-liners and he had a good time. And that made the mood of the whole first movie. And the second movie is just like zen and meditative and dour. And even though you've got this hopefulness of creating new life, it just failed to crack the frown of the movie.
Well, and my son was talking about, like, what is the bad guy trying to do here? I'm like, oh, he's trying to take his big flying aircraft carrier and all of this army of soldiers that he made into the real world to go conquer it. And my son thought for a second, he goes, he has no chance against the U.S. military. And I thought for a second, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of not really high stakes, is it? Because he's just going to be some whack job that immediately
Their
gets
life
shot
cycles
down.
aren't going to work. Their staffs with the glowy tips aren't going to be much good.
Ben, this is why their light cycles had fossil fuel engines in the computer, because he knew he was going to take him out into the real world. They had to run on something.
I guess I didn't. They didn't overthink it. Okay.
Oh, why did the plane stall? Why did the planes going straight up? Why did the engine stop working?
This is rule 0 of Brandon Sanderson's rules. Like, if light cycles are cool, then planes with light cycle trails are even cooler.
Not arguing with that. I 100% agree. Planes with the light cycle trails are fantastic. Love every piece of that. Even my son goes, like, this would be the best video game ever, and I agreed. But why do they stall? Like, physics don't matter. They don't need wings to fly. They demonstrated that.
That's the point I'm making about the clouds and the jet wash and the fossil fuels.
Clue's weird car didn't have any wings and just floated all over the place. But the bomber with the guns needed wings, and then it flew too high, so it stopped flying and fell backwards like a real plane? That doesn't make any sense.
They were just limited by the physics in the program they were using to animate the CGI.
Why did they never show... No, they needed a plot point. Like, it could have flown up forever, but they would have got shot down. Why did Tron never take his helmet off? They de-aged Jeff Bridges. It almost feels like every frame of Jeff Bridges being de-aged was costing them money. Like, I could see the budget of the movie going up every second. Young Jeff Bridges on the screen. They're like, we cannot afford to do this with the Alan character.
Put a helmet on him.
Helmet all the time. Why was he redeemed? Why did he crash into the ocean and turn blue right before he, quote, died? Can he die? He's just in the water. I thought they'd use that for power. Swim, you jerk.
Okay, so one of the rumors I read about Tron Ares that may or may not be coming out this October is that they're going to kind of retcon it and reboot. I guess they decided that none of that made sense and they didn't like it. They're going to redo it. I don't know.
Okay, cool.
So there's one other thing. I sent you this in a text. 2 years later, this had been a success at the box office, made like $400 million at the box office, which again, I don't know why it happens like this. Originally, they spent $17 million making Tron. It made $52 million at the box office, which is about 3 times its budget. Fast forward 30 years, they spend $170 million making Tron Legacy. It makes $440 million in the box office, which is about 3 times its budget, and they consider that one a success. On Rotten Tomatoes, the original Tron has like 80% fresh. The Tron Legacy has like a 50% fresh. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Oh, I'm in the minority.
2 years later, they took the momentum, I guess, of this, relative success at the box office and released a 19-episode series called Tron Uprising that's anime starring Elijah Wood, also known as Frodo Baggins. And I started watching it, and it seems pretty good. So I say we give it a chance for next time.
Okay. My son was mentioning this show, and he said he watched the entire thing. I did not know you were wanting me to watch it too, so I will see if I can squeeze that into my schedule.
All right. Carter, thank you for the support. All right. Well, listeners, I'm interested to know what you think. Do you agree with Josh? You got a different take? Go on our social media sites and let us hear your thoughts, links in the show notes.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, your friends might like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It's amazing the visibility we can get from that. And if you want to fund me and Ben talking about 40-year-old movies from now until the end of time, please consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.